Stardust Dreamers ASMR.
Welcome back, my dreamers. Today we are going to continue our Alice in Wonderland series with Chapter 3. So let's get started. This one's called A Caucus Race and a Long Tail. They were indeed a queer-looking party that assembled on the bank. The birds with draggled feathers, the animals with their fur clinging close to them, and all dripping wet, cross, and uncomfortable. Here you can see them all, cross and uncomfortable. The birds with their ruffled feathers. I like that owl. There's the dodo and a goose. Quick story. When I was a little girl, and we're talking like 1-2 years old, my parents used to call me Goose because I would take all of the books off of the bookshelves and rip them all down and strew them across the floor. Now, they just called me their silly goose because I guess that made sense to them. I don't know why goose and books go together, but it did to them, so. The first question, of course, was how to get dry again. They had a consultation about this. It seemed quite natural to Alice to find herself talking familiarly with them, as if she had known them all her life. Indeed, she had quite a long argument with the lorry, who at last turned sulkily and would only say, "I am older than you, and must know better. I am older than you and must know better." And this Alice would not allow without knowing how old it was. And as the lorry positively refused to tell its age, there was no more to be said. At last the mouse, who seemed to be a person of authority among them, called out, "Sit down, all of you, and listen to me. It'll soon make you dry enough." They all sat down at once in a large ring with the mouse in the middle. Alice kept her eyes anxiously fixed on it, for she felt sure she would catch a bad cold if she did not get dry very soon. Said the mouse, with an important air, "Are you all ready? This is the driest thing I know. Silence all around, if you please. William the Conqueror, whose cause was favoured by the Pope, was soon submitted to by the English, who wanted leaders, and had been of late much accustomed to usurpation and conquest. Edwin and Morcar, the Earls of Mercia and Northumbria," said the lorry, with a shiver. "I beg your pardon," said the mouse, frowning, but very politely. "Did you speak?" "Not I," said the lorry hastily. "I thought you did," said the mouse. "I proceed. Edwin and Morcar, the Earls of Mercia and Northumbria, declared for him, and even Stigand, the patriotic Archbishop of Canterbury, found it advisable." "Found what?" said the duck. "Found it," said the mouse, rather crossly. "Of course you know what it means." "I know what it means well enough when I find a thing," said the duck. "It's generally a frog or a worm. The question is, what did the Archbishop find? What was his it?" The mouse did not notice this question, but hurriedly went on. "Found it advisable to go with Edgar Atheling to meet William and offer him the crown. William's conduct at first was moderate, but the insolence of his Normans— "How are you getting on, my dear?" it continued, turning to Alice as it spoke. "As wet as ever," said Alice in a melancholy tone. "It doesn't seem to dry me at all." "In that case," said the Dodo, solemnly rising to its feet, "I move that the meeting adjourn for the immediate adoption of more energetic remedies." "Speak English," said the Eaglet. "I don't know the meaning of half those long words, and what's more, I don't believe you do either." And the Eaglet bent down to its head to hide a smile. Some of the other birds tittered audibly. "What I was going to say," said the Dodo, in an offended tone, "was that the best thing to get us dry would be a carcass race." "What is a carcass race?" said Alice. Not that she wanted much to know, but the Dodo had paused, as if it thought that somebody ought to speak, and no one else seemed inclined to say anything. "Why," said the Dodo, "the best way to explain is to do it. And as you might like to try the thing yourself some winter day, I will tell you how the Dodo managed it. First, it marked out a race course in a sort of circle. The exact shape doesn't matter. And then all the party were placed along the course here, and there, and there, and there, and there. There was no 1, 2, 3 and away, but they began running when they liked, and left off when they liked, so that it was not easy to know when the race was over. However, when they had been running a half an hour or so, and they were quite dry again, the Dodo suddenly called out, "The race is over," and they all crowded round it, panting and asking, "But who has won?" This question the Dodo could not answer without a great deal of thought, and it sat for a long time with one finger pressed upon its forehead, but the Dodo doesn't have fingers. Nope. I guess they mean feather. With one feather pressed upon his forehead. The position in which you usually see Shakespeare in the pictures of him, while the rest waited in silence. At last the Dodo said, "Everybody has won, and all must have prizes." It sounds like postmodernism to me. Okay. I'm sorry. Why, she, of course, said the Dodo, pointing to Alice, with one feather. And the whole party at once crowded round her, calling out in a confused way, "Prizes, prizes!" Alice had no idea what to do, and in despair she put her hand in her pocket and pulled out a box of comfits. Luckily the salt water had not got into it, and handed them round as prizes. "There's exactly one piece all round." "But she must have a prize herself, you know," said the Mouse. "Of course," said the Dodo, very gravely. "What else have you got in your pocket?" They weren't kidding, guys. The Dodo has hands. I'm not even joking. I gotta show you this. Look at that. Do you see it? He's got the body of a bird, but he has the hands of a man, and he has a nice little wooden walking stick. I'm absolutely flabbergasted. I did not know that Only a thimble, said Alice sadly, pulling it out of her pocket. Hand it over here, said the dodo. Then they all crowded round her once more, while the dodo solemnly presented this thimble, saying, We beg your acceptance of this elegant thimble. And when it had finished this short speech, they all cheered. Alice thought the whole thing very absurd. Like a dodo with hands like a man. But they all looked so grave that she dare not laugh, and as she could not think of anything to say, she simply bowed and took the thimble, looking as solemn as she could. The next thing was to eat the comfits. This caused some noise and confusion, as the large birds complained that they could not taste theirs, and the small ones choked and had to be patted on the back. However, it was over at last, and they sat down again in a ring, and begged the mouse to tell them something more. You promised to tell me your history, you know, said Alice, and why it is that you hate C and D. Cats and dogs, she added in a whisper, half afraid that it would be offended again. Mine is a long and sad tale, said the mouse, turning to Alice and sighing. It is a long tale, certainly, said Alice, looking down with wonder at the mouse's tail. But why do you call it sad? And she kept on puzzling about it while the mouse was speaking, so that her idea of the tale was something like this. Furry said to a mouse that he met in the house, Let us both go to law, I will prosecute you. Come, I'll take no denial, we must have the trial, for really this morning I've nothing to do. Said the mouse to the cur, Such a trial, dear sir, with no jury or judge, would be wasting our breath. I'll be judge, I'll be jury, said cunning old furry. I'll try the whole cause, and condemn you to death. I'll try the whole cause, and condemn you to death. Such a scary tale. You're not attending, said the mouse to Alice severely. What are you thinking about? I beg your pardon, said Alice very humbly. You'd got to the fifth bend, I think. I had not, cried the mouse, sharply and very angrily. Not, said Alice, always ready to make herself useful, and looking anxiously about her. Oh, do let me help to undo it. I shall do nothing of the sort, said the mouse, getting up and walking away. You insult me by talking such nonsense. I didn't mean it, pleaded poor Alice, but you're so easily offended, you know. The mouse only growled in reply. Please come back and finish your story, Alice called after it, and all the others joined in chorus. Yes, please do. But the mouse only shook its head impatiently and walked quicker. Walked quicker, walked quicker, walked quicker, walked quicker, walked quicker, walked quicker. What a pity it wouldn't stay, sighed the lorry, as soon as it was quite out of sight, and an old crab took the opportunity of saying to her daughter, Ah, my dear, let this be a lesson to you, never to lose your temper. Hold your tongue, Ma, said the young crab, a little snappishly. You're enough to try the patience of an oyster. What a young daughter she has. I wish I had our Dinah here, I know I do, said Alice aloud, addressing nobody in particular. She would soon fetch it back. And who is Dinah, if I might venture to ask the question? Alice replied eagerly, for she was always ready to talk about her pet. Dinah's our cat, and she's such a capital one for catching mice. You can't think. And oh, I wish you could see her after the birds, while she'll eat a little bird as soon as look at it." This speech caused a remarkable sensation among the party. Some of the birds hurried off at once. One old magpie began wrapping itself up very carefully, remarking, "I really must be getting home. The night air doesn't suit my throat." And a canary called out in a trembling voice to its children, "Come away, my dears. It's high time you were all in bed." On various pretexts, they all moved off, and Alice was soon alone. "I wish I had not mentioned Dinah," she said to herself in a melancholy tone. "Nobody seems to like her down here, and, well, I'm sure she's the best cat in the world. Dear Dinah, I wonder if I shall ever see you any more." And here the poor Alice began to cry again, for she felt very lonely and low-spirited. In a little while, however, she again heard a little pattering of footsteps in the distance, and she looked up eagerly, half hoping that the mouse had changed his mind and was coming back to finish his story. Let's go on, shall we, to chapter 4, which is called "The Rabbit Sends in a Little Bill." And what do you know? The pitter-pattering of feet, it was the White Rabbit, trotting slowly back again, and looking anxiously about as it went, as if it had lost something, and she heard it muttering to itself, "The Duchess, the Duchess, oh my dear paws, oh my fur and whiskers, she'll get me executed as sure as ferrets are ferrets. Where can I have dropped them, I wonder?" Alice guessed in a moment that it was looking for the fan and the pair of white kid gloves, and she very good-naturedly began hunting about for them, but they were nowhere to be seen. Everything seemed to have changed since her swim in the pool, and the great hall with the glass table and the little door had vanished completely. Very soon the rabbit noticed Alice as she was hunting about, and called out to her in an angry tone, "Why, Marianne, what are you doing out here? Run home this moment, and fetch me a pair of gloves and a fan. Quick now." And Alice was so frightened, she ran off at once in the direction it pointed to, without trying to explain the mistake it had made. "He took me for his housemaid," she said to herself as she ran. "How surprised he'll be when he finds out who I am. But I better take him his fan and gloves. That is, if I can find them." As she said this, she came upon a neat little house, on the door of which was a bright brass plate with the name www Rabbit engraved upon it. She went in without knocking, and hurried upstairs in great fear lest she should meet the real Marianne, and be turned out of the house before she had found the fan and gloves. "How queer it seems," Alice said to herself, "to be going messages for a rabbit. I suppose Dinah will be sending me on a messages next." And she began fancying the sort of thing that would happen. "Miss Alice, come here directly and get ready for your walk." "Coming in a minute, nurse, but I've got to watch this mouse hole till Dinah comes back, and see that the mouse doesn't get out. Only, I don't think," Alice went on, "that they'd let Dinah stop in the house if it began ordering people about like that. They'd probably kick her out." By this time she had found her way into a tidy little room with a table in the window, and on it, as she had hoped, a fan and 2 or 3 pairs of tiny white kid gloves. She took up the fan and a pair of the gloves, and was just about to leave the room when her eyes fell on a little bottle that stood near the looking-glass. There was no label this time with the words "Drink Me," but nevertheless she uncorked it, and put it to her lips, because she said, "I know something interesting is sure to happen. Whenever I eat or drink anything, I'll see what this bottle does. I do hope it'll make me grow large again, for I really am tired of being such a tiny little thing. It did so indeed, and much sooner than she expected. Before she had drunk half the bottle, she found her head pressing against the ceiling, and had to stoop to save her neck from being broken. She hastily put down the bottle, saying to herself, "That's quite enough. I hope I shan't grow any more. As it is, I can't get out the door. I do wish I hadn't shrunk so much." Alas, it was too late to wish that. She went on growing, and very soon had to kneel down on the floor. In another minute there was not even room for this, and she tried the effect of lying down with one elbow against the door and the other arm curled round her head. Still she went on growing, and as a last resource she put one arm out the window and one foot up the chimney, and said to herself, "Now I can do no more. Whatever happens, what will become of me?" Luckily for Alice, the little magic bottle had now had its full effect, and she grew no larger. Still, it was very uncomfortable, and as there seemed to be no sort of chance of her ever getting out of the room again, no wonder she felt unhappy. It was much pleasanter at home, thought poor Alice, when one wasn't always growing larger and smaller and being ordered about by mice and rabbits. I almost wish I hadn't gone down that rabbit hole. And yet, it's rather curious, this sort of life. I do wonder what can have happened to me. When I used to read fairy tales, I fancied that kind of thing never happened. And now, here I am in the middle of one. There ought to be a book written about me, that there ought. And there was. And there was. And when I grow up, she says, I'll write one. But I'm grown up now, she added in a sorrowful tone. At least, there's no more room for me to grow in here. But then, thought Alice, shall I never get any older than I am now? That'll be a comfort, one way, never to be an old woman, but then always to have lessons to learn. I shouldn't like that. Oh, you foolish Alice, she answered herself. How can you learn lessons in here? Why, there's hardly room for you, and no room at all for lesson books. And so she went on, taking first one side, and then the other, and making quite a conversation of it altogether. But after a few minutes she heard a voice outside and stopped to listen. "Marianne, Marianne," said the voice, "fetch me my gloves this moment." Then came a little pattering of feet on the stairs. Alice knew it was the rabbit coming to look for her, and she trembled till she shook the whole house, quite forgetting that she was now about 1,000 times as large as the rabbit, and had no reason to be afraid of it. Presently the rabbit came up to the door and tried to open it, but as the door opened inwards, and Alice's elbow was pressed hard against it, that attempt proved a failure. Alice heard it say to itself, "Well, then I'll go round and get in at the window." "That you won't," thought Alice, and after waiting, she fancied she heard the rabbit just under the window, and suddenly spread out her hand, and made a snatch in the air. She didn't get a hold of anything, but she heard a little shriek and a fall and a crash of broken glass, from the which she concluded it was just possible it had fallen into a cucumber frame, or something of the sort. Next came an angry voice, the rabbit's, "Pat, Pat, where are you?" and then a voice she had never heard before. "Sure then I'm here, digging for apples, your honour." "Digging for apples, indeed," said the rabbit angrily. "Here, come and help me out of this." Sounds more broken glass. "Now tell me, Pat, what's in the window?" It's an arm, your honour." He pronounced it "arum." "It's an arm, your honour." "An arm, you goose. Who ever saw one that size? Why, it fills the whole window. Sure it does, your honour, but it's an arm for all that. Well, it's got no business there at any rate, so take it away. There was a long silence after this, and Alice could only hear whispers now and then, such as, "Sure, I don't like it, your honour, at all, at all. Do as I tell you, you coward." And at last she spread out her hand again and made another snatch in the air. And this time there were 2 little shrieks, and more sounds of broken glass. "There's a lot of cucumber frames down there," thought Alice. "I wonder what they'll do next. And as for pulling me out of the window, I only wish they could. I'm sure I don't want to stay in here any longer." She waited for some time without hearing anything more, and at last came a little rumbling of cartwheels and the sound of a good many voices all talking together. Here is the picture of her trying to snatch the rabbit, and he is falling into the glass. She has very pudgy little fingers, doesn't she? Very fat, pudgy little fingers. And the poor rabbit looks like he's having a stroke. I suppose I would too if a hand that big tried to grab me out of thin air. There was a sound of a good many voices all talking together. She made out the words. "Where's the other ladder? Why, I hadn't to bring but one. Bill's got the other. Bill. Fetch it here, lad. Here, put them up this corner. No, tie them together first. They don't reach half far yet. Oh, they'll do well enough. Don't be particular. Here, Bill, catch hold of this rope, or the roof bare. Mind that loose slate. Oh, it's coming down heads below a long crash." How did that? It was Bill, I fancy, who's to go down the chimney. Nay, I shan't you do it, that I won't. Then Bill's to go down here, Bill. The master says you're to go down the chimney. "Oh, so Bill has got to come down the chimney, has he?" said Alice to herself. "Why, they seem to put everything on Bill. Who's Bill? I wouldn't be in Bill's place for a good deal. This fireplace is narrow, to be sure, but I think I can kick a little." She drew her foot down as far as the chimney as she could, and waited till she heard a little animal. She couldn't guess of what sort it was. It was scratching and scrambling about in the chimney, close above her, and then saying to herself, "This is Bill." She gave one sharp kick and waited to see what would happen next. The first thing she heard was a general chorus of, "There goes Bill," and then the rabbit's voice alone, "Catch him, you, by the hedge," and then silence and another confusion of voices. "Hold up his head, Brandy, now don't choke him. How is it, old fellow? What happened to you? Tell us about it all." Last came a little feeble squeaking voice. "That's Bill," thought Alice. "Well, I hardly know no more, thank ye. I'm better now, but I'm a deal too flustered to tell you all. All I know is this: something comes at me like a jack-in-the-box, and up I go like a skyrocket." "Sure you did, old fellow," said the others. "We must burn the house down," said the rabbit's voice, and Alice called out as loud as she could, "If you do, I'll set Dinah at you." There was a dead silence instantly, and Alice thought to herself, "I wonder what they will do next. If they had any sense, they'd take the roof off." After a moment or two, they began moving about again, and Alice heard the rabbit say, "A barrowful will do to begin with." A barrowful of what? thought Alice, but she had not long to doubt, for the next moment a shower of little pebbles came rattling in at the window, and some of them hit her in the face. "I'll put a stop to this," she said to herself, and shouted out, "You'd better not do that again," which produced another dead silence. Alice noticed with some surprise that the pebbles were all turning into little cakes as they lay on the floor, and a bright idea came in her head. "If I eat one of those cakes," she thought, "it's sure to make some change in my size, and as it can't possibly make me larger, it must make me smaller, I suppose." So she swallowed one of the cakes and was delighted to find that she began shrinking directly. As soon as she was small enough to get through the door, she ran out of the house and found quite a crowd of little animals and birds waiting outside. The poor little lizard, Bill, was in the middle, being held up by 2 guinea pigs who were giving it something out of a bottle. I forgot to show you the picture of Bill that made me laugh. That's Bill. Ooh, that was loud. This is Bill. Oh my goodness, that's just hilarious. Poor Bill. As soon as she was small enough to get through the door, she ran out of the house and found quite a crowd of little animals and birds waiting outside. The poor little lizard Bill was in the middle, being held up by 2 guinea pigs, who were giving it something out of a bottle. They all made a rush at Alice the moment she appeared, but she ran off as hard as she could, and soon found herself safe in a thick wood. "The first thing I've got to do," said Alice to herself as she wandered about the wood, "is to grow to my right size again. And the second thing is to find a way into that lovely garden. I think that will be the best plan." It sounded like an excellent plan, no doubt, and very neatly and simply arranged. The only difficulty was that she had not the smallest idea how to set about it. And while she was peering about anxiously among the trees, a little sharp bark just over her head made her look up in a great hurry. An enormous puppy was looking down at her with large round eyes and feebly stretching out one paw, trying to touch her. "Poor little thing," said Alice in a coaxing tone, and she tried hard to whistle to it, but she was terribly frightened all the time at the thought that it might be hungry, in which case it would be very likely to eat her up, in spite of all of her coaxing. Hardly knowing what she did, she picked up a little bit of a stick and held it out to the puppy, whereupon the puppy jumped into the air all of its feet at once, with a yelp of delight, and rushed at the stick and made believe to worry it. Then Alice dodged behind a great thistle to keep herself from being run over, and the moment she appeared on the other side, the puppy made another rush at the stick, and tumbled head over heels in its hurry to get a hold of it. Then Alice, thinking it was very like having a game of play with her, and expecting every moment to be trampled under its feet, ran around the thistle again. Then the puppy began a series of short charges at the stick, running a very little way forwards each time, and then a long way back, and barking hoarsely all the while, till at last it sat down a good way off, panting, with its tongue hanging out of its mouth, and its great eyes shut. This seemed to Alice a good opportunity for making her escape, so she set off at once, and ran till she was quite tired and out of breath, until the puppy's bark sounded quite faint in the distance. "What a dear little puppy it was," said Alice, as she leant against a buttercup to rest herself and fanned herself with one of the leaves. "I should have liked teaching it tricks very much, if only I had been the right size to do it. Dear, I'd nearly forgotten that I've got to grow up again. Let me see. How is it to be managed? I suppose I ought to eat or drink something or other, but the great question is what?" The great question certainly was what. Alex looked all around at the flowers and the blades of grass, but she did not see anything that looked like the right thing to eat or drink under the circumstances. There was a large mushroom growing near her, about the same height as herself, and when she had looked under it on both sides of it and behind it, it occurred to her that she might as well look and see what was on top of it. She stretched herself up on tiptoe and peeped over the edge of the mushroom, and her eyes immediately met those of a large caterpillar. A large caterpillar. It was sitting on the top with its arms folded, quietly smoking a large hookah, and taking not the smallest notice of her or of anything else. And that is the end of chapter 4. Chapter 5, we will meet the caterpillar, because it's titled Advice from a Caterpillar. I hope that you you enjoyed this. I have very much enjoyed reading this story along with you. This is my first time, as I said, my first video, reading the full story. I read children's versions of it when I was a kid, and of course I watched the Disney version of the movie. And I've seen, Alice from Once Upon a Time and other different versions of the fairy tale. I love Alice a lot. She's one of my favorite characters from books, her and Peter Pan. But I'm very excited to be able to read this, and I hope that you found it relaxing and enjoying, if not at least entertaining. Me and all of my mistakes and my misplaced accents and my falling in and out of but I did hope you enjoy it. Also, I hope you enjoy the black backdrop. I am certainly enjoying it. I would like to get something to video with, because my laptop camera, it doesn't work very well. It's working much better today because it's very sunny outside today. Like, it's so nice. It's January, and it should be cold, but it's 44 degrees outside, and it was a wonderful day to film. I'm so thankful. So yeah, I love the black backdrop. I gotta iron it out. As you can see, there are some wrinkles in it, different places that I haven't ironed out fully, but that's okay. A little bit at a time. I have school starting soon, in 2 weeks, and I'm going to be taking 6 classes, 2 of which are literature classes. It's gonna be a lot of reading. But I will certainly continue trying to make at least one ASMR video a week. Next week, we are supposed to have a serviceman come out to check out our Wi-Fi and help us upgrade it. I don't anticipate it's going to do a lot, and so I'm hoping as I'm able to go to school that I will be able to upload my videos at school, because actually, even with everyone on at school, I get faster uploads there than I do here. The other night, well, it was several nights, my Christmas songs video, it took total 7 hours to upload. But anyway, I'm done rambling. I may cut this out later, I don't know. But I do enjoy talking with you guys, and I have enjoyed meeting each and every one of you, meeting other new ASMRtists and watching them grow alongside me. I think it's amazing. I know that ASMR is very young still. We now finally have millions of people that are interested enough to watch, to subscribe, and I think there's a whole lot more that watch but don't want to admit it. I'm excited to see where it goes. And if you enjoy these videos, please subscribe, hit the bell so you can get my notifications when I post. I have Patreon linked below if you're interested in helping me raise money so that I can upgrade my equipment and maybe someday upgrade my Wi-Fi. And also, every week, please check out my description, because I try to every week or in every video to list one of my favorite ASMRtists and a little description of them. Everybody that I feature in my descriptions they work very hard at what they do. They all specialize in different areas, but they are very kind, good people. And so I hope that you'll read what I have to write about them, and please go check them out and give them a sub if you enjoy what they do. Please do. The last video that I did, the Christmas songs video, I featured ASMR with Anna, and she's an up and coming girl. She's kind of if you're a Goodnight Moon fan, you would love her. And she just started about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. She's incredible. Please check her out. Her videos are absolutely wonderful, just masterpieces of work. And I know that they would really appreciate it. Any of the ASMRtists I suggest would really appreciate you coming to check them out too. So, I hope you all have a wonderful week. I hope that you have sunny days just like this one. And I hope that you, when you go back to school, if you're in school, that you enjoy it. That you would learn more about life and more about you. And as always, see you next time.